Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today we're going to be taking a look finally at the Asus Matrix 7970 Platinum. Now, quite a few of you noticed this in a previous video that it's been here for a little while, and I've been working on it pretty heavily really. But what I want to do is I'm going to show you around the card, give you a good look around it, because obviously I know you all want to have a good look. Then we'll move on to some testing, as we always do, mainly kind of benchmark stuff, and then we'll break off and then we'll have fairly lengthy conclusion at the end. Yeah, there's a fair bit of stuff for me to kind of explain for you on this one, rather than just telling you, about the performance of the card. As I always do, I will expand and explain a lot of stuff. It's definitely going to be one of those moments where you're going to need to kind of get comfortable. But trusty remote, it's now time for me to shush my mouth for this part of the video, and then we will move on so you can get an up close look at this card. Right then, so you've had a good look at the card. Next thing for us to look at is the Asus GPU tweak software. Now, I'm actually quite happy to say that for the first time with testing an Asus graphics card, this bit of software actually works. Because pretty much every other one I've ever touched, this has been just terrible. Cards crashing, this not working, that not working. With this, it actually works. It's pretty good. It's also quite clever. You can see down the left hand side that we've got a lot of options. You can do updates, there's settings where you can go in and change lots of stuff. If you want to have a look, then just pause as I'm doing this and you can see all the different options and everything in there. Now, one thing I will say is down here we've got GPU info. Smash that and you get your own version of GPU-Z, which will pop up on the left hand side, which is perfect. Also down here, something that you need to pay attention to is, well, you've got a benchmark icon there, but this one is the advanced mode, and you do need to hit that advanced mode. Now, with the advanced mode, you then get a lot of extra options. You get the VDD CI voltages, you get memory clock, there's memory voltage that you can change, fan speed you can change, actually change fan 1 and fan 2 speeds if you want. You can do it separately if you want, but you really wouldn't want to. Power target is like a percentage. CCC's got a very similar thing where you can allow it to have extra percentage of power. Load line calibration, that is actually a really nice touch. Bit like with your CPU, you can enable this or allow it to have more so that the voltages stay a lot more stable. And at the bottom you've also got a VRM clock that you can change as well. There's profiles down here, so you can save different profiles, so you can actually set up different core clocks and stuff. The card does come with an 1100 megahertz clock. One thing I will say is when you adjust the clock at the top, you can see that the GPU voltage at the bottom does stay fixed, but in advanced mode you can unlock this and you can change your core clock independently of your GPU voltage, which can be very handy, because in the standard mode it's definitely not as user friendly. You locked in and you don't necessarily get to push the clocks up that far. But something that I noticed with our card, I use 3D Mark Vantage. It's a really intensive GPU program, in that if your overclock is unstable on your GPU, Vantage will generally not pass or fail. It starts to artifact. It does a lot of strange things, and if you've got a stable Vantage clock, then pretty much everything else will run perfectly fine. It's when I was doing the 7970 clocks, Vantage was the benchmark that I was having to drop all of this, the core clocks right back for, to be able to get it to pass. Now, when I was benching, I could get 1200 nigh on. If I put this at default, I could get 1200 at nigh on stock volts. I bumped this up a little bit to 1300. Well, it's not nigh on stock volts, it's nowhere near, but it basically 1200 on the core, it needed 1300 on the volts, and it was 100% stable. Temperature stayed really good as well. The cooler well, the heatsink on the card actually does work really well. You can leave it in auto mode, but there is the button on the side that you can press, and I'll turn it on now, and it puts the fans to 100%. You're obviously only really going to be using that if you're hardcore overclocking, or if you live in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Now, something I also would like to say is, if I put this back to default again, if there's the voltage buttons on the side of the GPU. Now I'm going to smash these buttons right the way up now, so that they go red on the LEDs. Right, so I've got that turned right the way up, so the voltage has changed on the card. Something I find very, very confusing is that the GPU tweak doesn't change at all. So according to the card, the voltage has gone up, but according to this, the GPU voltage hasn't gone up. And it's a little bit of it's a strange one, because really, you know, going by the software, you would assume that the voltage hasn't changed at all. Now, this then led me to kind of look into it and think, right, well, what's my maximum stable overclock that I can get on stock volts? Then, if I put these up, can I overclock it even further? And the answer is no. So at this present moment in time, the only thing I can say is, personally, those voltage buttons aren't working. Now I'm going to turn them right back down again, because the lights on them are actually driving me a bit nuts. The other thing that I found very, very confusing is if you set your overclock to whatever you want it at. So we'll do this. Okay, you save it, you apply it, and then you have it all set up. So GPU tweak starts in with Windows and applies the clock and blah 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 blah. What I've been finding, whether it's the BIOS on the card at the moment or the program, is that every time I start Windows, this will say that the card is running at stock. But if you then open GPU-Z independently, it will say that it's not. Like, even this at the side, it will still say, this will say 1200 megahertz, blah 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 blah, but this part of the program will say that it's at stock settings again. So GPU-Z says it's overclocked, but the actual software says that it's not overclocked, and it's very, very confusing. So I don't think that this side of the software, I don't think they've ironed out all the bugs yet, and it may need a few more changes. Definitely they need to change that voltage thing with the buttons on the card, and also that, like I said, the startup error, because it always seems to read it at stock, even though this part will say it's running at 1200, this part says it's back to stock at 1100. It makes no sense whatsoever. So there are an awful lot of options on the card for overclocking, but as you've seen, we've only managed to get 1200 out of ours. It's heavily dependent on how lucky you get with the Silicon Lottery, and I really do need to cover that quite extensively in the conclusion, because it's pointless them making a card with all these tweaking options down the side for all these voltages, when, to be fair, you hardly need to touch them, and the most we've managed to get out of it is that, and we've had stock cards that have gone further than this in the past. I've got one here at the moment that will go 125 extra on the core, and it's a basic reference Asus 7970. So I don't see the point in them making a card that's all singing and all dancing, and then expecting you, the customer, to take a risk on whether you're actually going to get a core that's going to do the job or not, and overclock that bit further. I don't see that there's any point in spending £400, which is what this card costs, if they're not going to be ensuring you that you're going to get a GPU that's on that epic kind of like PCB and everything that they've specifically picked to be a good overclocking card. Because 1200, in all honesty, like I said, that's really not a big deal for a 7970. If you can get an OEM one that will do that, what's the point in having all these extra, you know, voltage options and tweaking options and all these things to try and take advantage of, when you're not going to have a core on there that's going to, you know, really let you, you know, spread your wings and put a really decent overclock in. But anyway, we need to move on. So I'm going to stop rambling on with this bit. We'll move on and I'll start rambling on with another bit. Right, so I'm not even sure how this is going to come out, to be fair, but I'll shoot it and maybe chop loads of bits out of it. We've got 3D Mark just opening to the right hand side. Now I have got the screen right up near the motherboard and it's all a bit, I'll turn the light on so that you can see. It's all a bit all over the place really. But the idea is that we're watching the light. And it's so that as the benchmark is running, you can see maybe times when you thought that the graphics card would have been working at 100%, maybe it's not so much. As we can see there, it's just gone to kind of like a darky blue, purpley sort of colour. Oh, that'll be my mobile phone telling me that we're I have an email. But as you can see, it's still not really gone red yet. Right, now we're into, it depends on where you look at it actually, which is quite confusing in itself. It's the RGBs for you though. In some places it just looks blue, and in other places it looks a bit purple. But we'll do it from what I'm seeing on the camera anyway. But as you can see, we've not seen any red yet. We'll come back a little bit just so that we can see a little bit more of the screen. It's been a while since we've used Vantage in any of the videos. Well, and actually played it anyway. So there we go, we've gone through the first test. Not a huge amount of GPU usage. Or certainly not extreme loading enough so that it's gone red. Right, now the lights have now gone kind of like a darky blue sort of purple colour again. But still no full-on redness. And that's pretty much the way it is throughout most of it. Very, very rarely does it ever go full-on red, which is quite confusing. Now I'm going to I'll stop the camera and I'll get another benchmark running, and just so that I can show you that it does eventually go red. Right then, so OCCT, I do like this program, so they keep expanding it. But anyway, it's got a section in it called GPU 3D, which basically uses the Fairmark benchmark. Now, as you can see, we have some lovely redness on the card. Instantly there, it's running at the absolute max. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to show you like the benchmark before in this is the fact that it doesn't really go red that often. Even throughout some of the games and stuff, it's never on that kind of redness all the time, which is one of the reasons why I think that we do need the option to be able to select these colours ourselves. I'll mention it in the conclusion. I think they've really missed a trick that you can't select this yourself and you have to depend on the graphics card loading, and we don't get a chance to be able to select it ourselves. And I think they've missed out on a trick basically. But anyway, what I'm going to do now is put my bench rig back to a kind of sensible kind of configuration rather than having the monitor balanced on the side of the bench table, and we'll have a look at some scores and some benchmarks. Hokey chokey, my lovely people, moving on to the benchmarks as I sit down with ghostly shadows all over the wall. Right, on the left hand side, that is an overclocked other brand card running at 1125 megahertz. On the right hand side we have the Asus, its maximum stable overclock for all the benches of 1200 megahertz. So we can see with 3D Mark 11 there that we've got on the left we've got 9577 versus 9636. Now that's really not much of an increase for the increase in the overclock, really. Now if we move on, I'll change these over. Now when we move on to the extreme, we can see that the power colour was actually in front. So it's got a lower clock, yet it's actually that little bit in front. Now you may think to yourself, Tom, you may have overclocked the Asus card a little bit too far. Well, I can tell you, this was literally the highest point that I managed to get it to. It had gone up to this, not gone up and then dropped off a little bit. If I knock the clocks back, then the scores drop as well. So we've got 3,246 for the other card, and then 3,218 for the Asus with a higher score, which was more than disappointing. Now, if we move on to Vantage, now this is still a great benchmark tool because Vantage is heavily GPU dependent. This is actually the one, if Vantage passes, then I know the card will be stable. It's one of the most grueling tests. A lot of the time Vantage will be unstable when everything else appears to be perfect. Now, not only is it pretty GPU dependent, but it also you do get a lot of a boost from your CPU as well. I can bottleneck this this benchmark with a CPU that's not overclocked enough, especially when you start running, you know, like 2 cards, 3 cards. You can get to the point where the CPU is holding everything else back. Bearing in mind I'm using a 3960X at 4.6 gigahertz. That's quite a big statement. Now, as we can see on the left, with the other card running a lower clock, we've got 40,870, and with the Asus we've got 40,649. So the Asus was actually below here. Now, you may be thinking straight away that it could be down to the fact that, you know, one was done on one lot of drivers, one was done on another lot of drivers. We can't retest everything every time. But the thing is, I use 7970s regularly, and I can honestly say that the scores have gone up with driver increments, not down. So with when testing this, the fact it's below is actually a lot bigger deal than you may first realise. Because if I was to get the other card back that scored that score on the left and retest it now, I would probably say that would be sat at about 41,000, maybe 41,200. So there's a fairly big difference, the fact that the Asus is still below. Now, if we move on and we have a look at the extreme, this again is another good indicator of what's going on. Now we can see that this time the Asus just managed to pull in front. We've got 21,396 on the left, and then the Asus on the right was 21,430. Again, that's probably about where I would have wanted it to have been, but considering the fact that it's on a higher clock and everything like that, I would have wanted it to have, you know, probably been a little bit more. This would have been where I would have expected this card to have been if it was retested. But where the Asus is running a faster core speed, like I said, I would have imagined it would have been that little bit further in front. Now, because as you can see, I keep screenshots for everything. Every review I've ever done, I've got screenshots and validations for, because quite a lot of times the vendors can start to get a little bit funny with you and demand that you prove your score. So I'm always extra anal about making sure I can keep that. Now, what we're going to do now, I'm not going to bore you with playing games and stuff with this, because that's really beyond this. So I think we need to move on to an extended conclusion now. Right then, peeps, so what we will do is I'm going to tell you the award, and then I'm going to do all my explaining of this, that and everything as we go through. So the award, quite surprisingly really, because I know a lot of you were probably expecting something a lot more along the lines of a gold award or a performance award or something, but shockingly we're only going to give it bronze. And to be fair, even that I would say is really kind of, you know, we're being quite nice by giving it a bronze, I think. Now, right, the thing is what a lot of people still to this day don't understand is there's a thing that us nerds, geeks, enthusiasts, whatever you would like to call us, call the silicon lottery. And that is, it doesn't matter that if you have a 7970, you know, matrix, and you had 100 of them, they won't all be exactly the same. It's the same with CPUs. Some CPUs overclock better than others. Some need lower volts to get to certain points, higher volts to get to other points. You never know what you're going to get until you get it, which is why when people professional overclockers and stuff, they can get sent boxes upon boxes of CPUs just to try and find that one good one. It's exactly the same with GPUs. Now, you may be wondering, why the bloody hell is he giving me, you know, a lecture on the silicon lottery when he's reviewing a graphics card? Well, the thing is this is obviously a hardcore overclocking graphics card. So the silicon lottery really kind of, it means more with this type of review than it would do a normal review, because you've got all these, the card has got all the bells and whistles that it could possibly need to absolutely, you know, eke out every last drip of performance from the core that's on it, the 7970. So we've got a big cooler which does a really good job of really good job of keeping it cool, even in auto mode. But we've obviously got the turbo fan that we can smash on for when we want to keep everything that little bit more, you know, temperatures down that little bit lower, so that we can run higher voltages and higher overclocks and keep things stable. We've got voltage switches, we've got, you know, more power phases. They've thrown everything at this to try and make sure that you've got every tool available to you to be able to overclock it. Now the thing is if you're not putting an amazing core on the card in the first place, you may not need all of those extra bells and whistles, when technically if the core that you actually put on it, the 7970 chip itself is what I'm referring to as the core, if that part of the card is the weakest link, then you aren't going to need all those other bits. A normal kind of reference card would have done the job perfectly fine. And in all honesty, I've had better reference cards, just because the core on it has been, you know, a better one. I think when you get to these high, you know, mega high-end cards with all of this type of thing, they really are missing a trick when they don't cherry pick the GPUs. They really, really do. I don't see the point in a card like this with all these bells and whistles. In case you didn't hear that, that was my phone that just went off. All these bells and whistles, when a perfectly stock reference OEM Asus 7970, let alone one of the other ones, wouldn't really matter, would overclock better than this. And I have got an Asus card, reference cooler, reference PCB design, literally everything as AMD intended, that overclocks and performs better than this Matrix 7970. Now, like I said, the only reason for that really is the fact that it's got the actual GPU that's on it is better. It's that one. It's a silicon lottery winner. Now, I have had reference cards in the past, like I said, that have overclocked better. Generally, one of with Vantage, 3D Mark Vantage is a massively GPU intensive benchmark. And all of the big overclockers out there will know exactly what I mean when you say something is Vantage stable for a graphics card. The overclock's pretty strong, because you can normally get games and 3D Mark 11 and Unigine and stuff to run at a lot higher core frequencies than you can with a Vantage run. Now, previously with some of the cards that I've done, I've been getting around the 1125, 1150 kind of mark for a Vantage stable overclock. With this, fair enough, we did manage to get it up to 1200, which in itself, the fact that we got it there and it was vantage stable was quite a big achievement. But the scores didn't really, you know, make any difference whatsoever. It was still only performing as well as the reference cards were at 1125. Now, something else that was really, really confusing for me, really, I thought, we've got vantage stable at 1200, we've got to be looking at 1300 plus on the core for, you know, for a few more other benchmarks, or even, you know, very best being able to get it up there. You know, like I said, maybe getting a Unigine run out of it or something, just so that we can see how far that core can go. But there was, it just did not want to go much further than that. I wasn't really getting even stable Unigine runs at 1250. Now again, I've got an Asus reference card here that will do 1325 megahertz. Not even maxing the volts out, and will run pretty much everything else on the, you know, other than Vantage. So 3D Mark 11 runs, Unigine runs, everything at 1325. It is a really, really good card. But then to kind of put that into context, I've got another reference card that you can't even get 1100 megahertz Vantage runs out. So, but anyway, we're talking about this. So the thing is this card does have everything that it could possibly want, yet it's being let down by that core that's on there. So it doesn't matter. If I think personally, if you're going to be buying a card like this, going to be paying 400 quid for it, you want to know that you're going to be getting a core on your card that is going to take advantage of all these bells and whistles should you want to use it. And if you're, you know, going to be looking for, you know, massive overclocks, maybe overclock records, all that kind of thing, because that's really what this card is about. If you don't get a core on it that's, you know, one of your old reference ones is going to be better, you're going to be thinking to yourself, well, what have I just spent 400 quid for? And I would be completely on your side with it as well. What have you just spent your 400 quid on if you're not getting a decent core on it? It just seems completely counterproductive. Now, the other thing is I know that loads and loads and loads of you will be looking at this and thinking, oh my word, I just want to play games on it, Tom. Well, if you just want to play games on it, it's middle of the road. All of the extra options, bells and whistles, really are not going to be doing you any favours whatsoever if you're just looking at this for games. It is an overclocking card. And that's why, like I said, I keep going back to that point about it. The cherry pick GPUs, it needs them, you know, to be able to get the most from them. Even if it made them a little bit more limited or a little bit more pricier, that's what. Once you get up to the kind of points of these cards, there's absolutely no point just chucking any 7970 on there that you can get your hands on. There's just, you know, like no point. But something that has struck me, considering that, you know, many of you out there will just buy this, you know, maybe run it as stock, maybe run it at, you know, reasonable low overclocks, is the little LED thing on the side. Now, we're all getting to the point now where, well, I say not we're all, a great number of us are getting to the point now where, because of the choice that we have in the market, we we tune and style our rigs depending on our tastes and what's going on in our systems. Now, we've obviously got the activity thing on the side, which, you know, you can get blue, green, red, there's loads of colours that it'll do on the side. So we know that little light thing there, there's a whole range of colour options there. Now, you would think by now Asus would have realised maybe it would be a lovely idea if we can override that colour changey thing and just set it to stay static at one colour, so that it can match our systems. Surely it can't be that hard for us to just be able to go into the command thing and just go, I want it to stay red. No, I want it to stay green. Or I want it to stay blue to match my rig. I mean, you've just arse raped me for 400 quid for a card that you're not even cherry picking the GPUs for, which kind of makes the whole point about it being, and this is an amazing overclocking card, completely and utterly pointless. But yet you won't even let me choose the colour of the lights on the side of the fucking card. I mean, what's the point? They really are. They've got to start handing these features back to the customer. And the whole dancey colour thing, The only time that's ever interesting, to be fair, is when you're watching a benchmark or something and you're like, oh, it's not really doing anything then. Other than that, are you honestly going to want to look in your rig and sort of like, I'm on my Windows desktop, my graphics card's not doing anything. Oh yeah, I'm playing Battlefield. Oh, look, my GPU's running at 100%. Oh yeah. Like I said, the novelty is soon going to wear off. I'm sure most of you out there would much prefer being able to, you know, choose the colour of that Matrix logo yourself. More than likely, most of you are just going to smash it on red and leave it lit up red all the time. But if you have got a colour-coded system, it would be nice to be able to go, maybe I'll have it blue, maybe I'll have it green, maybe I'll have it yellow or orange or whatever. So, hopefully I've kind of explained why we did give it a bronze. It is still a good card. To get a card at 1100 megahertz out the box is still a pretty good achievement, I would say, because I would say that's a good kind of 24/7 kind of clock, you know, for any OEM card anyway. Once you get past this kind of point, most of them start to drop off. As we found with this, we were on really were on the knife edge at 1200 megahertz with this card. Like I said, we couldn't get Vantage to be stable beyond that point, but once we did push beyond that point with other benchmarks, the scores just nosedived, and then eventually when we got up to like 1250 and stuff, it just wasn't running at all. So it's kind of a bit, again, it all comes down to the silicon lottery and that core in the middle. But for £400, it is an eye-watering amount of money. And it, in all honesty, peeps, if you think it's going to be a big idea to go, oh, I've got an Asus Matrix, wow, do you know what I mean? EP. With these, I really don't see the point. And I normally love these type of cards. Maybe if they'd sent me one, you know, like, you know, nose through the boxes and sent me one that literally blew the world alight, and I was getting Vantage runs, you know, above 1300 and stuff like that, then fair enough. Could have changed my opinion entirely. But, you know, seeing these and the fact that they are going out in kind of a mediocre state, really, they're not that great benchmark wise at stock, definitely nothing, you know, huge to write home about. Definitely, you know, not that great when they're overclocked either, especially when you look at the results. You kind of, it's matching OEM cards running at lower clocks. What would I honestly say? I would honestly say that the problem is that with this 7970, AMD, when they designed the card and the OEM board in the first place, they did an amazing job. The cooler works really well. Yeah, it can be a bit noisy when you turn it up, but even with overclocks, they stay cool, calm and collected. They do run cooler than the 680, although then it's because this fan spins up a little bit more, but the cooler itself works really well. There's more than enough tweakability with the standard card to be able to get you to push to decent clocks and the like that. And unless you're an immense hardcore overclocker, 99.99% of you out there don't really need anything beyond the OEM card. Sure, a nice cooler and stuff can make a nice difference, but the original design was great. I would even say if you're a gamer that the DirectCU 2 7970 is massive overkill for your needs, especially when you start talking about triple slots and stuff. I'm honestly, and that's why I use a 7970 on my bench rig. It is one of my, well, it's my favourite card. I've got one on my bench rig, I've got one in my desktop rig, I've got two going in Orca. They're great cards. Adding all these bells and whistles and stuff is really a bit pointless because the original card was so awesome in the first place. Kind of an analogy when I was discussing this with like the other guys here about this is it's almost like if you imagine a Christmas cake being the most amazing cake in the world. So you've got your fruit cake in the middle, you've got all your ingredients and everything in there, all your nuts, your fruits, the epic cake, then we've got a nice bit of marzipan, some lovely rolled icing on the top. Imagine that as being the 7970. Then, the way I see it, is Asus has taken that epic cake and it's almost like they've then decided we're going to slap a load of jam on it, stick some chocolate spread on it, stick some peanut butter on it, chuck some marshmallows, some sprinkles, all this, and all they've then done is added all these extra things on top of something that was epic and not really done anything for what the underlying part of it was great in the first place. They've essentially nailed on loads of little extras that have got you nowhere, further up the overclocking line really, or nowhere further up than you were originally, and they just want to charge you more for it. So what would I say? I would say strip all those things back off again, go back to what was original in the first place, maybe just stick a different cooler on it or something like that, because it, like I said, it was great. It was great already. Now, I'm not saying that it is going to be the way things are for everything, but unless they really are going to put they've put the time into designing the card to be able to do everything, but then they're not putting the time in to make sure that they're putting decent cores on it in the first place, and it just doesn't make any sense. So I'm not going to go round and round it in circles anymore. That is why we gave it a bronze award, and that is also why I would honestly say that if you're a gamer looking for one of these, I'd say even the DirectCU 2 is going to be overkill for you. I'd personally, if it was me, it was my money, or you asked me for my own personal opinion, I would tell you just to go and buy one with a reference cooler, save your money, and you'll never notice any difference. But with that bombshell, gotta love a Top Gear reference, but with that bombshell, this is Tiny Tom Logan with another video for you. Out.